Our guest tonight is Mike Adams from Natural News, and he wrote an article that was carried by InfoWars talking about a robotics revolution that, as he points out, may replace as much as 70% of the human race in just 3 generations. Well, Mike, welcome. It's an interesting article that you had up. One of the things I was curious was, why did you go for as long a time frame? I mean, the things that I've seen from people, they're putting it not 3 generations, but maybe 1.5 generations they see this happening.
Well, it's clear that soft kill technologies do exist right now, and they are being used right now, like we mentioned, vaccines, GMOs, fluoride, and so on. But the development of really complex humanoid robotics is incredibly complex, and it's going to take science and physics and chemistry quite a number of decades, I believe, to get to the point where those robots are feasible and they start replacing human laborers and kicking us into a more aggressive hard kill type of scenario. So they've got to solve the power problem. Batteries, they're
Right. I've talked to Roman Yamplowski, and he believes that he's someone who's involved in AI security, cybersecurity. He sees this coming very quickly. But there's a lot of scientists who are looking at this, and they look at Moore's Law, they look at how fast things are changing computationally, but they say there's a lot more to it. The skeptics will say there's a lot more to it than just raw processing power. That's necessary, but it's not sufficient. And so you point out in your article, and you started talking about it, some of the things that are going to happen. Just talk about that. Power supply is one of those. Go on with some of the rest of those.
Right. Well, hardware needs to advance considerably. And also, you mentioned Moore's Law. I want to be on the record saying Moore's Law is not a law, like the law of gravity or the or laws of economics. Moore's Law is an observation, and it may not hold out. If it does, there's no question that the processing units of computers are going to vastly exceed the processing power of the human chemical brain, but they will never exceed the power of the human spiritual mind. That's another topic.
Yeah.
But the hardware is really where things are going to be held up. It's very difficult to program a robot to physically interact in a 3D world. Vision recognition, you've got to have muscle, artificial muscle coordination, senses, touch senses, which are highly, highly complex. Very difficult to integrate into a processing computer, a robot brain, if you will. I believe these advancements are going to happen, but they will take many decades. And I think that probably a 50-year time frame is a pretty good guess of when we're going to have household robots that can really take over a lot of the household tasks, and agricultural robots and so on.
It's hard to put a time frame on that. And it's
very difficult.
One of the things that you referenced was this future of employment, how susceptible are jobs to computerization. One of the things they point out was that these guys were talking back in 2004 about how difficult it was to program driving, for example, saying that there's the perception issue, making a left turn, how many things are involved in that. And yet they said it was only 6 years after they said how impossible this was going to be for AI. It was only 6 years later that Google had a self-driving car in 2010. I've seen that with maps. I remember back in the 1980s when I was in computer science, people were talking about the traveling salesman issue. How do you get a computer to route an efficient route for somebody that has to make multiple stops, or even going from point A to point B? That's a trivial thing now. With all the smartphones are able to do that. So when you've got a lot of very intelligent people, and they're all working on this in parallel with each other, you've got DARPA funding so much of this research.
It depends on what you're traveling through. So flying a robot in the air with drones is very simple. You have control surfaces. The air is easy to navigate. Drone robots in the ocean is also very simple. Drone robots driving vehicles is also orders of magnitude simpler than bipedal humanoid robots walking on 2 legs and interacting with stairs and houses and sidewalks and forest grounds. So to build, let's say, a humanoid military robot that can engage in combat is incredibly complex. We won't see that effectively. Not a bipedal robot that can actually accomplish combat and do it quietly without carrying a large gasoline engine on it, like the current robots that you see out there that are being researched. It's going to take decades, in my opinion, to have a humanoid-shaped robot that can do these things effectively. Now, I hope it takes longer, because I'm really concerned about the impact of what this is going to have on humanity. Yes. If it happens more quickly, then we should be even more concerned, because there's no question these robots are going to start displacing real human beings in the labor force, in the military, in manufacturing, in all kinds of areas, agriculture, for example. And the question is, what will the globalists then decide to do with those humans who are displaced?
And we see that happening right away, really, because you're talking about these self-driving vehicles. right away you could have a lot of people displaced, truck drivers, cab drivers, a massive disruption right there in the labor market.
Yes.
But as we've seen in the past, just in our lifetime, we saw them talking about, well, the dangerous and dirty jobs of manufacturing are going to go offshore. Don't worry, that's a good thing. We're going to have a service economy. And I saw a lot of people saying at the time, right, yeah, we're all going to have a great life doing each other's laundry if all we've got is a service economy. But we're seeing the service economy move offshore now. We're even seeing engineering jobs moving offshore. So it's not going, and it's the same thing's going to happen here with the robots that's happening with that. And that brings us to the end game of why we see so much of this stuff in the food supply that you're constantly talking about at Natural News, where they're poisoning us. And we look at things like smart meters and we say, look, in Italy, they have smart meters where they're reporting back on energy usage and that sort of thing, but they're doing it over the power lines by requirement. But here, they're doing it wirelessly, even though there's a lot of research talking about and showing the deleterious effects of this microwave technology on human health.
Your insight is right on, David, and this is the big concern, the end game. It appears to be that what the globalists really want is a small population of elite thinkers, elite innovators, high IQ scientists, whatever. And that population might be only 500 million people. So they don't have a long-term plan for the other 6.5 billion people on our planet. Those people are going to be replaced and displaced by robotics, robots working in the 3D world, in the physical world. And the question is, how are they going to get rid of those other 6.5 billion people? There's the soft kill method, so-called family planning, abortions, infertility drugs dripped into the water supply, vaccines, and so on, spontaneous abortions. Then there's the hard kill methods, start a nuclear war, unleash a bioweapon that they have in the research facilities. This is where they could get really, really nasty and actually kill billions. It's one author refers to it as giga death, billions of people dying. And I think that could be in our future. So the solution for you watching this as individuals is make sure you can do things that robots can't do. Have skills, have creativity, communication skills, be more intelligent than a basic laborer if you can. Invest in your own education, and teach your children the same thing so that they can have more value that a robot can't replicate. That may be the only real survival strategy in the long term.
Yeah, that's right. And in the short term, you need to protect yourself against these soft kill techniques, because that is a very, very real thing. I think a lot of the pushback that I get from people when you talk about the different health effects of a lot of the stuff that you've discovered that we talk about here, water filters, that sort of thing, fluoride in the water, a lot of times people are reluctant to accept that because it just doesn't make sense to them. It's like, why would anybody do that? Why would they do that to their fellow man? It doesn't make any moral sense to them. Sometimes it doesn't make any economic sense to them. But when you look at what's going on over the horizon with the robots and how, as this one author points out, it's humanity's last invention, they see the massive population that they're soft killing as totally unnecessary, a burden that they want to get rid of.
That's right, the so-called useless eaters. I think the globalists believe that, and this is their belief, not mine necessarily, but they believe that Earth must compete with other intelligent civilizations in a huge galaxy, and that Earth has to create really advanced military weapons for defense of the planet, that it needs to communicate with other civilizations. And in order to do so, Earth has to advance itself technologically and conserve its resources. And in order to do that, again, this is their belief, not mine, they think that they're going to have to kill 6 billion people or reduce the population by 6 or 6.5 billion people.
Well, very frightening perspective. We're out of time, but thank you for bringing that up. It's a great article. People really need to take a look at this and really see the bigger picture and see it as the elites are seeing it, to really understand why so much of this is being done. Thank you so much for joining us, Mike. Thank you. Well, as Mike was pointing out, that's what they believe. They believe that the mass of humanity are useless eaters who can be taken out. They also believe that they're going to become God or gods. We don't believe that, but it's amazing what they'll be able to accomplish. And there's going to be huge, rapid changes in society. If you want to see some possibilities of where this might lead, a good resource for that is Robot Alchemy, a book that we sell at InfoWarsStore.com by Tex Mars. It looks at robots and their thriving or dominating humanity, which is what a lot of these people are looking at. And surprisingly, they're not don't have a problem with it. They're just fine with that happening. Well, that's it for tonight. We'll be back on weeknights at 7 Central, 8 p.m. Eastern.
Now you can watch The Alex Jones Show live as it happens at Infowars.com/show.
You'll find links to all of our content there and a free 15-day trial for Prison Planet TV.
More than 60 movies and documentaries all in one place at Infowars.com/show.
Alex Jones here to warn you about some of the most important health information you may ever hear. I'm talking about radiation, radioactive fallout, radioactive particles contaminating the Northern Hemisphere. Conservatively, since the 1940s, the Northern Hemisphere of our planet has more than doubled its background radiation. In fact, that was before Fukushima exploded. Now the levels are going up and up and up. Fish are contaminated in the Pacific, and the FDA, the EPA, and others, they're not worried about it. They've been raising the levels of what they claim is safe radioactive particles. Well, I began to discuss with my wife protecting myself, her, and of course our children. Most importantly, I have 3 small children, ages 10, 9, and 5. Radiation really affects children more than adults because they have fast-growing cells. All the literature is clear on that. And I went and talked to medical doctors, scientists, nuclear physicists, nutritionists, and I said, what's the number one thing I can do to protect my family? And they said, Alex, it's leave the Northern Hemisphere. Go south of the equator. That's where the radiation levels are very, very low. If you look at the wind patterns, the north hardly interacts with the south. And it's unfortunate that we've done this to our planet. So after more than 2 years of research into how to protect my family, looking at all the literature, talking to the experts, across the board they agreed iodine is key, but of the family of iodine, nascent, natural, non-GMO, non-factory iodine that comes from the earth is absolutely paramount for your thyroid and other functions in the body. The literature, the research, it's there. It's not my opinion. It is admitted that iodine is essential for the health of our bodies overall, and nascent iodine is the best form. Now, we're announcing the launch of InfoWarsLife.com, and we're going to bring you scores of products over the next few years that we're researching and developing. But nascent iodine is the first product we're coming out with because it's so important, and it's also listed as a fluoride detoxer. It does so many other things. Your body needs it, and when you don't have enough iodine, forget the radiation, your thyroid absorbs the sodium fluoride and other things. And it's the good iodine, the nascent iodine, that is able to block that and just do so many things for your body and your health. I've been taking it. It's amazing. It's a lot better than coffee, I'm here to tell you. And that's why we are now offering our own nascent iodine that's double the strength, made in the best laboratory that is FDA certified and accredited. And it is double strength at half the price of the leading competitor. You know my rule, bring you the highest quality products at the lowest prices we can, so it's a win-win-win. I believe in you reap what you sow. So not only will you get the best deal on nascent iodine at InfoWarsLife.com for your general health and also for any type of emergencies or disasters, you will also be getting a great deal and supporting the InfoWar and our news operation, promoting the cure for tyranny, the First Amendment, promoting liberty and a rediscovery of the Bill of Rights and Constitution and true Americana that's made this nation so great. So please join me in being among the first to visit InfoWarsLife.com. We've got discounts if you buy the nascent iodine in bulk. I challenge you to try to find a better deal. We have the best deal out there and the best quality. In closing, here is probably the most important point. You don't just take nascent iodine when disaster strikes, when there's some new giant disaster. The Northern Hemisphere is already double what it was 60 years ago with the radioactive background. I believe from the research I've done, and the experts I've talked to, it is key to take nascent iodine to protect your thyroid from the radiological disaster that's already happened. And unfortunately, future disasters that will happen. That's why it's important to fill your thyroid up now with the healthy nascent iodine so that the sodium fluoride, the radioactive isotopes, and the rest of it can't get in. That's the key. This is something that across the board has been shown in study after study to be an absolutely essential nutrient in the body. Until a few decades ago, the government put it in the salt because they knew you needed it. But then they took that out, that's good for the thyroid, and put the sodium fluoride in that's bad for it. Talk about eugenics, talk about soft kill, talk about an invisible weapon in the water supply. This stuff is on record as a detoxifier for the fluoride they're adding to our water. Nascent iodine and InfoWars Life Survival Shield in double strength at half the cost of the leading competitors. Please visit InfoWarsLife.com today.